Welcome back to the Cream City Club podcast. I am Spencer
Hmm.
Michaelis, and I'm here again with Gunnar Amala. Gunnar, how are we doing today?
I'm doing good. Spencer, I didn't realize that we both had a birthday this past weekend.
What?
You're supposed to say happy birthday to me. It was
Oh yeah.
yeah, you ruined the
It's not my
joke.
birthday, Gunnar.
It was my birthday, and so I'm coming off a good weekend, so ready to
And I
go.
wished you a happy birthday, so this does not work on me like it did on
I
you.
know. I know. I try to do a The Office joke for people who don't know, but
All right. Well, it was Gunnar's birthday, so everybody please say happy birthday to Gunnar in the replies on Twitter and in YouTube comments, just all over the place. Please say happy
yeah.
birthday to Gunnar.
Yeah.
Um, if you're listening and you haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to do so on whatever platform you're listening on and rate us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod to stay up to date on these episode releases and interact with our posts as we try to build up the community on social media. Today's episode, we're going to be focused on the Bucks, and we've kind of got 2 games to cover. Going back, our last pod covered the Pacers game and everything that happened around the Pacers game and Giannis is 64. And I guess at the end of that pod, we kind of wondered if this might be able to give the Bucks a bit of a jolt going forward. And based on how the 2 games this weekend went, it looks like it just might have, because the first game against now a very lackluster, probably more of a G League team in the Detroit Pistons, the Bucks were finally able to kind of put a game out of reach and not have to play all their guys in the fourth quarter with a 146 to 114 win. So, first of all, I mean, just good to see them, like I said, just kind of put a team away, and we didn't have to worry about all of a sudden that 20-point lead turning into a 8-point lead, and now Giannis is playing the last few minutes, and especially the
Hmm.
first night of a back-to-back. Just good to see them actually put a team away like they used to. And then the second night of the back-to-back, they faced what's a much improved and a pretty solid Houston Rockets team, and they were able to come away with another pretty convincing win, and they improved their record to 19-7 on the season. So just kind of starting with that Pistons game, Gunner, what'd you see in that one, and what were your takeaways from the first game of the back-to-back?
Yeah, so instantly we got no Chris or Malik that we got that report right away, and you're immediately thinking this is going to be a trap game. Like where they're coming off 22 straight losses, the script is looking like it's not going to go our way. And like you said, it was nice to see that we did just kind of put the foot down and really take command of that game. And another note in that one as well as Pat was back, and he did play pretty well in that game as well. So nice to see them both get back, and then because of those two things happening with Chris and Malik being out, we saw Marjon get that start. Um, and again, I want you to jump in here because this is a topic that we discussed. We, I didn't necessarily ask for him to start, but I did ask for him to let's see him get some minutes and let's see him not take over an offense, but let's see him like put some shots up. Let's see if he can create his own shot a little bit. And he did that in the first quarter, and I was excited. And he got off to a pretty solid start. I don't know how many points of his 11 points he had in the first quarter, but a good chunk. And then he ends up with the game going 4 of 8 overall, 1 of 2 from three. And I'm not disappointed, obviously. I mean, that's just kind of what happens in these blowout games. It's just like whoever can find the ball. Um, it's just it just kind of sucked because it's just like, oh, that could have been a nice way to kind of get him going. And then obviously we're going to talk about what he did next game, but maybe what did you see out of Marjan before we get any further? Because that was a big topic for us in one of these pods.
Yeah, I think we saw the flashes of what we've always kind of seen in flashes, which is when he's aggressive, when he has confidence, he can look like a pretty interesting player. Like that take against Wiseman where he kind of had a hesitation and then he went off his right foot only, which anytime he jumps off one foot, I like to see that. He is so bad at jumping off of one foot. He's always got to go off two, and seeing him go off his right foot and go up and kind of posterize Wiseman was good to see. He hit that three right away in the corner. He had the first 7 points really of the game for the
Yeah.
Bucks. And like you said, he ended with 11. He didn't really continue going, but it was nice to see some confidence and some aggression. And you could kind of see it carry over to the defensive end right away. Like we talked about last time, it's so much of it seems to do with just if he feels confident on one end, it carries over to the other. But if he loses confidence, it can go out the window really quickly. So it was good to see. It was nice to just see him get minutes with the regular rotation guys too a little bit more and extended minutes at that. So I don't know that I took too much away from him being able to do well against that Pistons team, but it was nice to see him get an extended run and just kind of see some of that confidence hopefully start to build for him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 32 minutes too. I don't know if we've even seen that this year. I mean, a lot of that probably came in that, garbage time too, but just nice to see that overall as far as the minutes jump up. The two big things obviously though in this game to me were Dame, and we're going to talk about him later on, so I won't touch on him too much, but really got going in this one. I think he had a season high in threes with six. And then of course, Bobby Portis finally put it all together in offense and just finding the shots. And I think there was a stat too. I was trying to find it. They said it on the broadcast, but they said a lot of his points came off of like second chance looks or something. And that was just, we always talked about him on the offensive glass, and that is how he creates a lot of his baskets and a lot of his putbacks and stuff. But just second chance points in general, he's pretty big on that too. So, um, my Bobby point in general is, I think at this point, I and his defense to me still wasn't great in this one, but he just really needs to be a plus plus in offense for me to be like, yeah, he's a plus overall. Like he's helping us, or at the very least, just like neutral. Like I just think that at this point, his defense to be is I was remember that meme of the security guard who acts like he's like patting down the like coming into the stadium, like he kind of fakes does it. That's just kind of his interior defense at this point. Um, but if he's doing this well on offense and he is that big of a contributor, I do think then he is a plus. And if he's in the right mix of a lineup, I can see that as well too. One that kind of favors and the defense we're starting to figure it out gradually too, and he can kind of make it work in there. I I I'm just a little concerned, I guess, overall because we didn't see him really have this great of an offensive output um for a big chunk of these games until this stretch here, which again encouraging. I don't want to be negative, but um and he was plus 24 in this one as well. So I mean, again, crappy team, but it was nice to see him finally just kind of break through and get going because that is what I think I need out of Bobby Portis to be a plus on the floor.
Yeah, I think we know Bobby can play really well against bad teams, and he's always been able to show that. I think for me, it was good to see it. We'll talk about the Rockets game more, but it was good to see kind of a continuation of that and seeing some good things from him where it wasn't like a huge negative in that game either. But it's to me, it's just like I need to see the defense, like you said. I just don't think we're ever going to get it. You might get him if he's blitzing once in a while. He might be able to get a hand on the ball and get a couple turnovers forced, but he's not going to just be a solid defender of any type. Like he needs to try and create a little havoc because otherwise he's gonna get beat. I mean, the difference when especially when he subs in for Brook, the way teams attack versus what they do when Brook is in the game is insane. Like the first possession that Brook comes out, they're just like, oh, we can go to the hoop now, and they just immediately attack, and there's nobody there unless Giannis is also able to help. So it's yeah, like you said, I don't know that I learned too much about Bobby here, but it was good to see him get it's good to see him get the three-pointer going, especially. He's been shooting a lot better from there, and that
Hmm.
was continued. I think he was 4 of 7 in the Pistons game, so that was good to see. And I think just Ajax minutes again. We talk about him a lot on here, and we'll talk about him more for this Rockets game, but it was good to I mean, he keeps shooting threes at like a 45% rate, and
Yeah.
they're not like special, like he's not doing anything special, but when he's open, I feel decent about him shooting it and making it. And that's all you can ask out of a guy who nobody thought could even hold his own from out there. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's too much more to go over in this one. But the Pistons are terrible, man. They are so bad.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Uh, they're bad. I would expect them to be like fighting for like a play-in spot too. I didn't think they'd be 2 wins bad. Like that's
No,
I don't want to draw attention to the league or anything, but it does seem a little fishy. I know they had injuries. Like I love Isaiah Stewart, so that's like one of my favorite players in their team. So he was out in
agreed.
this one. Um, but man, I mean that roster's not horrible too. It's just like I just don't get it. And you have a clunky mix there of like Wiseman and Bagley and stuff. But you brought in this huge, which we're very familiar with, Monty Williams. We don't necessarily love him, but Like you bring in this guy who's like, oh yeah, we're gonna change our franchise around a little bit, and then you're like 10 times worse. It's just I don't get it. But yeah, I mean other game notes from this game too. I mean, two big headliners for me. I don't know if that was the most threes we had in the game. Was it 19?
Yeah.
Probably pretty close if it wasn't. And then we just killed them on the boards, which again, that's probably speaking to the Bagley Wiseman. They just probably just handing us boards like they got nothing down low. So and Stewart, like I pointed out too, he's a guy that's caused Giannis some trouble too, being a smaller guy, physical, but um yeah, I mean, not too much to take away from a stinker like this, but we could be having a lot more negative connotation here if we did snap their 22 game losing streak if we lost. So we got to take it and we got to go.
Yeah. And like I kind of said right away, like it was just good to see the guys not have to play in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I texted you at one point. I was like, "Do you remember a few years ago when Giannis would play the fourth quarter like every 4 games and that was it because the Bucks were winning every game by 20?" And that doesn't necessarily mean they were prepared for the playoffs because of that. And we kind of saw that happen over time, but it was a lot more relaxing as a fan to just have every game kind of out of reach before you even got to
Hmm.
the end of it. Um, but kind of you touched on Monty Williams, and I do before we move on to this Rockets one, I do want to talk about that a little bit. I think the whole Pistons organization, it didn't make sense for them from their standpoint, and I think they had to go out and overpay to get him to come into a team that was going to struggle. Even if I agree, I don't think this should be a 2-win team. But I also don't think they fit their roster to like they have some talent on their roster, but I don't think it fits together at all. I don't think they
Hmm.
built a team that makes any sense together at all. And putting him in that situation kind of sucks for him, but I don't think he's doing a good job of mashing the roster together either with the way he runs his lineups. And I mean, Hayes and Cade, neither of them are shooting very well this year. Both
Well,
can
Hayes
finish.
never does.
Well, yeah, Killian never has and probably never
Yeah.
will, but and then
Ivy
you have
not a great shooter.
and then you have Thompson out there who's not going to shoot well,
Yeah.
and Bagley who is not really a shooter, and you just don't see these lineups out there where I mean Bogdanovich can shoot and that's their guy in their starting lineup. Like in today's NBA, you do not win games with one shooter on the court and a couple guys who might be able to make open shots. I, I Jaden Ivey hasn't been very good this year, but I'm still shocked that he just does not get regular minutes very often. I know it's been a little bit more lately, but Sasser got hurt, but I do like Marcus Sasser a lot. If I were them and he's healthy, I don't really know what happened after the game. I've no idea what if it was just a little ankle sprain or what ended up being the case. But if I were them, he would be playing quite a bit, and he would have Killian Hayes' minutes for sure because they need somebody who can put the ball in the bucket in that starting lineup. So I don't know. They're a mess. It was nice to see the Bucks just handle their business and put them away, especially because we had this game the next day against the Rockets, who, like I pointed out earlier, they're a good team this year. They're very solid, really good defensively, and they brought in a good coach in Ime. And I don't know. I was a little worried about this game going in. So obviously we ended up winning the game, kind of put them away late. It was 3-point game, I believe, with a couple minutes or 3, 4 minutes left before Chris hit a three from the top of the key. But what were your takeaways from that one?
Yeah, I mean, I was worried too, but more in the sense of that they're actually like a solid team, like you're
Oh yeah.
alluding to with that Ime signing. I think they're like, I don't know what it is after that last game, but they got to still be top five in defense, I would assume. Um, so I mean, coming in, I knew that they obviously had good on-ball defenders and stuff with Fred and, of course, Brooks. But again, the small notes for this one, no Malik again. So what does that mean, Spencer? Hallelujah! We got Andre Jackson starting. It was glorious. 36 minutes from him. I think we just said he put like 25 minutes last game. So I'm nervous, not nervous because I think he's gonna play from, going forward, but we're gonna have to see once Malik comes back and kind of how all those minutes shake out. But I think it is a question of not really a question, but now I think it could be a conversation of who you start, and we can ask that question more after we break this game down. But um, again, no Malik, so Andre starting. Um, Speaking to that young core again, when we had Marjon starting last game, Marjon just MIA in this one, which is weird again to see that too. It's almost like Adrian just kind of takes sort of these games when you kind of have a role player like that out with Malik, and he gave Marjon his chance last game, and now he's going to give Andre his chance this game, probably knowing Malik's close to coming back too because Marjon only played 12 minutes today or last night. Um, didn't shoot, didn't even score. The classic Tony Snell. Probably the people who joke about Tony Snell. That was a Tony Snell stat line. But yeah, I mean Andre. It was funny too. He's pointing out some of his plays. it- I was just joking to you in a text, but it was the first one happened with it was like someone got fouled and then he just instantly like tapped the ball out to Chris for an open three-pointer. Like who even thinks like this guy? This guy has such a high IQ. It is absolutely nuts. And we always talked about the on-ball defense and stuff, but his like offensive flow just gets like so overlooked. And that was something that I enjoyed too when I was kind of deep diving in when we drafted him. Is just like I thought he'd be a slightly better ball handler, maybe more than he is, but I think he can handle it still too. Like if I mean we've seen Bobby Portis bring the ball up in that Pistons game a couple times. Uh so I think he could handle it, but maybe again just like Marjan, speak to Andre what you saw because I know you're pretty excited about him in this last game.
Yeah, the way he processes the game is not normal for a rookie, even an older rookie. I mean, obviously he played out his college career at UConn, but the one you texted me about, like I was thinking I just said the same thing out loud, like, wow, that was just it was I think Giannis drove. He got fouled, but the whistle was kind of late and Andre had gone up for the rebound and Chris was in the corner and he just smacked it directly to Chris like backwards, knowing exactly where he was. He had seen it probably out of the corner of his eye before he went up for the board, and he just knew
Hmm.
exactly where he was and how to get it to him. And there were a bunch of plays in both games, really, but a bunch of plays where it's just he'll be in that dunker spot, and instead of being too worried about getting like a handoff or a dump off, I mean, when somebody drives, he'll set a flare screen for somebody to get a wide open corner three, and that's how Marjon got his that first three we talked about in the Pistons game. Ajax just screened his guy and nobody could get to him then because he just saw what was about to happen in front of him, sealed off a guy and got his guy a wide open three. And you just see him doing that stuff all the time. And I have a feeling he's going to have some games where he's getting called for moving screens. We've already seen it a few times because he's trying so hard to do stuff like that. So sometimes it is to his detriment. But I would rather have somebody processing and thinking about the game that way and having it play out in front of them and making some mistakes because of trying to do something that helps the team. I'd rather have someone doing that than making those mistakes because he's trying to get his own, he's trying to get his shot, he's trying to do too much. Like, no, he's trying to do something that helps the team in general. And he did fall out of this game. We should point that out. But 36 minutes guarding someone like Van Vliet, who I believe Van Vliet ended up with what, 22 points? And he shot 50% from the field, but Ajax just made it tough all game and he was chasing him around screens. And like, this is a tall guy. He was getting caught on some of these screens. He's not perfect as like a one-on-one defender at this point, but there's nobody trying harder than him on the court. That's for sure. He is out there working as hard as he possibly can to do whatever he can to get in the way. And you just, it's hard to even put into words, but it's just, he knows how to play basketball at a level most veterans don't get to. It's just he has a feel for the game that people don't have. And obviously, nobody wants to comp guys to Draymond Green at the moment, but you can totally see how those comps have come around because different attitude, not quite as aggressive and hostile as Draymond, but even when he makes a pass, like he's constantly trying to seal a defender, he'll like make a pass and cut off a defender so that the guy can't get to it. It's just all those little things that, like I said, if you added that type of thought process to Giannis's game or something, he would be. I don't even know how you would explain what Giannis is if he could process the game like that because there's just a level to it that I. It's hard for me to believe when I watch it how smart the guy is on the court. So I rambled. I talked a lot about him there, but
That leads us into I had this fun quote that I saw that Dame actually talked about Andre in the starting lineup. On Twitter, I saw he said, he just keeps going, he's a pest out there in the ball, making guys work. He's getting us extra possessions on the offensive end. He's flying in there on the defensive rebounds, just his activity and his energy. a lot of times young guys, they want to show what they can do ability-wise, and what he brings to the game is always something you can always put on the floor. It's not always something that you'll see in the box score on the stat sheet, but you can feel his presence in the game all the time. So that was from Damian Lillard. So he's a good guy for an eye of talent, and I think if you got a guy like that who, look, he knows offense, and he probably loves playing with a guy like that. Just like you said, Giannis, people love playing with Giannis, young Giannis. So I mean, I think if Andre or Damian loves that about Andre, and that was kind of the vision that we saw is this is a guy that doesn't need the basketball to be like efficient on the floor. Like not a guy like Bobby who need, like I said before, needed the score to be a plus on the floor. Or even Marjon. I mean, I think Marjon can be more of like again Tony Snell, where he's a solid guy overall because he doesn't make a ton of mistakes, but Andre does not need to shoot once in a game probably to make it actually be a plus in the game, which is just unbelievable, like you said, from a rookie. But enough about Andre Jackson. We'll move on a little bit. So Giannis in this one, not a perfect Giannis game. We're gonna have a Giannis praise section here at the end of this podcast, but it just to me it looked a little bit shaky, and this is probably the first time we've seen him shoot under 50% in quite a while. I don't know what the stat is on that, but I was a little nervous because his shot and his free throws, he didn't shoot a ton. I mean, his first three to me just like, oh, there it is. Like it didn't look right again. And then his free throws, he might have, I don't think he airballed one, but there's a couple that were just short. And it was just like, oh, he's short arming it again. He's aiming it. And I think I pointed it out last episode how he's a good free throw shooter. And I should not have done that. I know I shouldn't have done that. I risked it. Um, but yeah, I mean, he was fine towards the end of it. And there was a stat too that I had with Dame and him, but basically them at the end of the games, Dame took over and did his thing at the end of that one. But him and Giannis, that pick and roll, I think is like 10th now in the league. But more than that, I think Frank Madden posted this. Giannis, and this is something that we haven't talked about really, is Giannis as the pick and roll ball handler. On the flip side of that, has something that's been really good too. And that comes along too with I think because he loves driving so much. I wonder how much he's keeping that ball or whatnot, but his finishing has been so great this year too. So I think him pairing with like guys like Bobby or Brooke, and even with Pat back, Pat's always been a pretty good screener and not necessarily roller, but a guy who whatever drops back perfectly with him too. So something that we saw at the end of that game too that we could probably point out is keep an eye more on that because Giannis with the ball now, and then you can go to that because we talked a lot about that pick and roll. And then Chris too, as a final note, really of this one is started out pretty bad for 3 quarters, and it was pretty reminiscent of this might have been his last game of that first stretch he had last year, almost a year ago, probably to the day. I know it was in December, mid-December, but you probably remember this one too, that Grizzlies game where Dylan Brooks had him just in a complete like like I don't know what it was, but he just had him locked up. I think he was like 1 for 12 in that one. And that type of pressure on Chris is something that he's always gonna struggle with. And over the years we've thought about Chris a couple of times where I like to poke fun at his ball handling sometimes. And there's something we both agree on this, and you can chime in too because Chris is your guy, but there's something to Chris where when he does have those turnovers, it just looks horrible. Like he like he freezes up. And I think a guy like Dylan Brooks who applies that pressure constantly is not a great guy for Chris. But I guess yeah, if you want to speak to Chris a little bit more, because I know you probably got something on it, but that's probably the worst matchup possible for Chris if it is just a 1v1, but Chris is never really in that situation a ton. But I guess what did you see from Chris here? And he did break through in the fourth quarter, so maybe speak a little bit to that because he did kind of turn it around there in that last quarter.
Yeah. So I've always been, like you said, Chris is my guy. So I probably have some bias when I look at these things. I've always felt that, and you touched on this, but I've always felt that people remember his turnovers more because every single one of them he somehow makes look terrible. Like, I think people think he turns the ball. I bet you if you asked people after the game if he had more turnovers or Giannis did, you would not have guessed that Giannis had 6 and he had 4. And you wouldn't have guessed that Dame had 3 and he had 4. It would have felt like Dame had, or that Chris had way more turnovers than those two, just because of how he makes them look. They look awful, and I don't get how he does it, and I don't know why it happens to be that way. But I was looking at some stuff, and this is not meant to be a knock on Dame at all. But per 100 possessions this year, Dame is averaging 9.5 assists and 3.7 turnovers. Chris is averaging 8.7 assists and 4 turnovers. So worse, yes, worse. But in comparison, I mean that's a minimal difference between the assist to turnover ratio. And that's for a guy who's not really playing point guard as much as Dame is. Now, if you look at the point differential in 100 possession per 100, it's not close. Dame has him by a ton, and that's supposed to be that way. To me, I think that you don't want Chris like in crunch time. I don't want him bringing the ball up the court. But if you get him the ball on the wing or you get it to him in like mid-range type post, I feel very comfortable with him handling the ball in that type of area. Do I want him, like I said, if he brings it up and they're going to trap him at half court, we're going to have problems because he does struggle with that. And I think there's like Chris has a constant calmness to his game and it gets disrupted when people kind of put pressure on him or double him and he doesn't react super well to it. I don't think it's a lack of a handle. I mean, this is a 6'8", 6'9" dude. Like he's a tall guy. It's a pretty good handle for someone his size. But I do think that at the end of games, I want, unless it's obviously free throw time, I want the ball in Dame's hands or Giannis's hands. But Chris can operate in the half court. Any other time of the game, I feel pretty comfortable with Chris unless a team is showing that, hey, we're gonna blitz them and we're gonna make them uncomfortable. Yeah, then you go to someone else and maybe Campaign has to play more minutes while Dame's out or whatever to get somebody in the game who you can trust a little bit more to handle that pressure. But to me, the turnovers have just always been overblown for Chris. And I think it's becoming even more so this year. But like you said, Brooks is a tough matchup for him. Tari Eason is good. That dude is going to be really,
Yeah.
really good. And he was guarding him a lot too, but he was kind of the guy that Chris got his against in the fourth. That was when they put Brooks on Dame a lot more in the fourth, and then Tari was guarding Chris, and Chris just was that was kind of a vet against a young dude. Like Tari was right there, but Chris was getting his separation and getting a shot up over him, and he felt comfortable against him. Like you said, I think Brooks was giving him some trouble early on. That's, I mean, that's really my thing with Chris. I always feel comfortable end of game with him taking a shot. I will never complain about any shot Chris takes at the end of a game. But in terms of just bringing the ball up or ball handling too much, yeah, there's absolutely no reason at the end of games if Dame's healthy and Giannis is healthy for those two to not be the main primary ball handlers. But as a like a
Hmm.
secondary or a tertiary ball handler, yeah, I still feel fine with Chris having the ball.
Yeah. I mean, there was one time too at the end of that game where it was Chris, Giannis, and Dame. I don't know. We had to be up by like three, and they were all just kind of like together. And it seemed like I don't know if they like take turns. Like it's almost it seems like they have like the plays or the mismatches that they know what they want to attack. And like Dame and Giannis just both put their head down and went to the opposite corner, and they just had Chris go attack the switch or whatever it was, or the guy that he wanted to nitpick. So I think in those situations, it's just kind of like you got to live with if he does make a mistake because clearly we're trying to attack those situations. And Chris has come up so big in those situations in the fourth quarter so many times where those are the ones that I don't want to give too much insight into what we fight about, but that is one of the plays that I do fight about with Chris is he loves getting those kind of transition one-on-one situations and he kind of backs the guy down and he sometimes gets a little out of control, but he's doing it because he knows that he can kind of get to that mid-range pretty nicely or he can just fly past them because someone does try to pick his pocket. Um, and he had a play like that. I think he ended up driving and causing a foul or whatever, so it ended up working out. But um, yeah, I think I do trust him. But that was a good point. How I mean, really any of these guys, and I would honestly blindly say it to my point of Giannis is a pick and roll ball handler. I would say out of all those guys, Giannis is probably the one that I fear the most with the ball in those situations, weirdly enough. And clearly that's not true if he's a pick and roll ball handler and he's doing that well now. So I think maybe he's figured something out a little bit more to be more calm and in those situations. But to have three guys right now that can do that in the clutch is pretty cool. So
Yeah, and I think with Giannis, there's just always the threat of a charge type of turnover in that
that's probably
situation.
why. Yeah.
And the fact that well, he can pull up from mid range, but I don't want him to. But the other two, you can get downhill or you can take that shot. And that's always been the knock on Giannis from people. It's not really a knock, it's just a fact. Like there is reason why Chris finished games in the championship season because he has more threats to his game in that spot. But he can still pass to Giannis on the roll, and now he's in a good spot. So I do think end of game, you still probably want Giannis as the roll man more often than the ball handler, but like you said, he is performing really well as a ball handler. And no problem if they decide to go to that a little bit more often down the stretch too. And we still haven't even talked about Brook being involved in these pick and rolls or pick and pops and stuff. And there's a lot of
Hmm.
layers those four can bring to a game uh, in clutch time, and we've seen it all year. So I guess if we're on the topic of Giannis, though, I think we got to talk about a little bit that he did break another team record. He is now the all-time rebound leader for the Bucks. Um, and he got the game ball. They made sure to get that game ball, and Marcus Johnson made a big show of making sure to follow it after the game. Um, but it was just another kind of, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in a little bit, but just one of those things where it's like, wow, you just think back on it every time he breaks one of these records. It's just like, wow, this dude was
Hmm.
a 15th pick, a guy that hardly anyone even knew the name of when they took him, and now he's this. So I I don't know. Do you got anything else on that before we talk about a little bit of Dame?
Yeah, I mean, we can just touch on it now. I mean, they posted that 10 years ago today. He made his first career start, and they posted. I've seen photos of him from like rookie Giannis or second year Giannis, so how thin he is, and to think like that guy is our franchise leading rebounder, which now it's very obvious for just how massive he is. He looks like Hulk now, but just think that that guy turned into just this small stat. Like even forget the other ones, like the rebounds. I think it's just crazy in itself. Um, and then, of course, he joked with Chris how he's going to come for the 3-point record, which we do not want to see. I'm fine with every other single record that you want to break outside of the 3-point record. We can leave that to Chris, and we'll be fine with that. But
He can have
yeah, I
one.
mean, yeah, I mean, it just seems like Giannis. Maybe just this month. I mean, it was his birthday. We've been seeing so much praise, and it just seems like every week there's something incredible. Or maybe it's just a stretch, but yeah, I mean, he finds a new way to impress us every single time. So, cool to see.
Yeah. And then along the lines of Damian Lillard, we kind of talked last time about how Dame had mentioned that he wasn't really feeling at full strength yet. Like he felt like he was playing better, but he wasn't feeling like he was totally where he wanted to be. And it kind of felt like these last two games were as good as it had been so far this year. So I pulled this from Eric Name's article in The Athletic, but in December, Lillard is hitting 46.3% from the field, 44.3 from three, 90 from the free throw line. That's in the 7 games so far in December. Sunday kind of felt like the best game he had played all around, especially against a good team. I know he was mad that he didn't make all four of his technical free throws because he would have had 40 if he would have hit all four of them. But he mentioned after the game, he said, these last 2 games definitely felt different. I think I had some good games before, but it was just, I'm kind of a shot maker, so the ball was going in, but this was as good as it actually felt just in rhythm and the timing of how it happened. I would say this is the best it's felt. So, I mean, to me, it looked that way. You could tell early on in that Rockets game, he missed it pretty badly, but he actually shot a three from near the logo. And I mean, it did brick, but that was a pretty good sign to me.
That was his first logo shot outside of the half quarter for the win.
Right, right.
The opposite logo, but
Yeah. But
we
like
haven't
the
seen that.
fact
You're
that he
right.
finally felt like he could take that shot, like he felt comfortable taking that shot, said a lot to me about how he was finally feeling like this is where I want to be. And you can just kind of tell with the way the ball's going in lately, it just looks a lot cleaner. Like a lot of his shots early on were kind of rimming around and going down. He's still, I mean, that's going to happen, but it just feels like the ball is going through the net super cleanly. Like he's almost finding the right arc that he wants his shot to be at. And I don't know. It's definitely been nice to see because I still am waiting for that huge breakout where we all of a sudden see double digit threes in a game or something, which I think it's going to come sometime soon. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Anything to add on that? I mean, it's been nice to see from my end for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he said he was disappointed with not scoring 40. It's like I think he'll get there at some point. I'm not really that worried about it, but you're right. I mean, for me, it's always just going to be the comfort of our offense, and something we got to remember too is we've never named one acquisition ever. We've never had someone this good to have to mix with our group. Like it really has to be an impossible feat, and not impossible, but I mean to get it this quick in the season, even before January. I mean that seems extremely hard to do even with how good of a pairing we think Dame and Giannis are together. Um, and for a shooter too. I mean, I remember the Trailblazers fans kind of calming us down early in the season, whether it's preseason or whatever, saying like, "No, guys, he starts out like slow like this. Like this is kind of what he is." And Um, like I said, I mean, you said it too. We were never worried, but just to see him have that comfort back, and um, even when we talk about plays of at the end of the games, where like it just seems like now they know their roles and when to take over, when not to take over, what this guy's good at, what that guy's good at. And he just seems super comfortable now, which again, once he's going to get 50 points at some point, I'm very confident in that.
Yeah. So to kind of wrap up and put a bow on these two games, we talked a lot about Andre Jackson. Obviously, we mentioned that Beasley's out at the moment. We saw what it looks like against a pretty good team with Ajax in the starting lineup. And I guess the question for me is, and we've talked about this before, how we wanted to go this way. Now that we've seen it, do we think that one, a starting lineup change might be incoming where Ajax does end up taking that spot from Beasley and kind of moving Beasley to a sixth man role? And two, if not, should it be? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, from a point I made last episode, I think, where I did admit I was wrong with this starting group that we've got right now, how they are a plus. So I think knowing that, how they've had a lot of time now to kind of work out those problems that we saw early on, and they did become a plus because early on they weren't even really a zero for a good chunk of that, and then they really took off. I think just because of that, it's going to be hard to find a reason for a guy. I mean, they always say you don't lose your spot to injury, and he didn't have an injury. He was sick, but it's just because I don't think they really had a lull. I think that's probably why we're going to see Malik get back in there. But I mean, look, if you're asking me, I want Andre in there. He showed a lot in that last game. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm more encouraged by those high minutes that we saw in that game. I just don't see how you can pull away. You can pull away like 15 minutes easily off of that. But I mean, if Andre is getting 20 minutes, like I'm okay with that for now. And
Yeah.
then if it ever goes south with this normal group, again, they prove me wrong. So I'll sit back and enjoy it. And if it does go south, we do have a guy now who is proven a little bit where he can be in that group. And you said it during the breakdown, him being in the mix with just those starters in general. I mean, that's going to go a long way. That's why I just don't see it not being a thing. But I mean, even if this starting lineup's good and they've been good in the clutch, I mean, we could even see a situation where we keep that starting lineup the same. But if we can go to, again, I talk about playoffs all the time because that's what I'm worried about. If you're in a situation in the playoffs where we just keep the same starting lineup, but then once it gets down to crunch time and those numbers kind of start to come back to life a little bit, which we kind of expected, if you can turn to a guy like Andre even in those limited minutes, but then you can really throw him out there in the crunch time, I think maybe that's more of a better mix. But again, I mean, I'm sure you don't have a ton of different thoughts besides that. Maybe you think Andre should be in it right now. I wouldn't be mad at that, but I
Yeah.
guess what do you think?
Yeah. Do I think a change is coming? No, I don't. I do think they should. And like you said, the starting lineup's done really well together, the main five. But as you touched on, I'm not super confident it's going to do well when we get to the playoffs. And to me, the more time you can kind of spend integrating Ajax into that lineup with everyone else, like it was good to see these last two games, him spending that time with them. The more you can do that, I think the more it's going to help at the end of the year. I also think Beasley's just going to be better in that role himself. I think as a sixth man, where he can be the guy who is trying to score more often, and he's doing well. Like he's doing way better than I thought he was going to do in that starting lineup. I knew he'd make shots. He's making at a crazy clip right now. I mean, like a ridiculously elite clip from three. I don't know how well that will hold all season, but I do think he's capable. He's shown a lot of ability, like more than someone like Grayson, to actually get to the hoop, finish through some contact, create his own shot off the dribble from mid range or from three. I think he can be a guy who gives you points off the bench. And then when he's in that role, maybe he's not in at the same time as Dame as often, just gives him more of an ability to do that. And Ajax doesn't need the ball in his hands to be helpful. And you have four guys who do a lot of good things with the ball in their hands already in that lineup. So I would make the change. Again, I don't expect it to. And I get it. I'm not, that's not a knock on Griffin. Like, it's hard to, it's been like the second best five-man lineup or something in basketball is the starting lineup. So I'm not going to blame him for not wanting to go away from that. But I do think this had to have at least kind of put the idea in his head that if things do start going wrong or that you start seeing a slip in that production from the starting lineup, that Ajax could be a really good option to take that spot and to work and mesh with what we have in the lineup already. So to answer the questions totally, Do I think it's coming? No. Do I hope it does? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we got to remember too. I did say that I could see it dwindling a little bit, but I mean, Crowder is coming back. Malik is out, so that's two rotation players. But something I noticed too is campaigns minutes have gone down a little bit, and I always said that once, at least in public. I don't know if I said it in the podcast, but like I don't hate campaign. I just again I'm always thinking of the playoffs and beyond. It's just like, can this guy really get less like solid minutes in a playoff series? And he's making shots. So again, kind of to the Malik story a little bit, where it's just like he's making shots. So it's like, yeah, I mean, what am I gonna say? Like he's doing his job out there, but seeing his minutes come back down a little bit, you can, to me, you really could bring back Jay and you could bring back Malik and Andre is a guy who could quote unquote cover that backup point guard role a little bit. Like I talked about his ball handling a little bit. You don't necessarily need a backup point guard like a 6'1" guy in the playoffs. Like you can fill that role as long as you got guys who can handle it mediocrity. Like you got Damian Lillard, you got Chris Giannis. We talked about the ball handlers. Like we can make it work. So I'm not necessarily scared totally, but yeah, I mean it will get. We should probably touch on. I didn't forget about Jay, but I mean that is a big piece coming in. So
Yeah.
that'll be another thing that we got to mix in the pot as well. But just I'm trying to find ways to get Andre in the lineup, but I did notice that trend of Cam's minutes going down a little bit, and I think he was like 0 for 4 last game too. So again, I like him. It's just once he stops making shots at like a really good rate like he is, and he doesn't take, we can argue about his shots sometimes. He always does it within the offense. Like I always talk about that phrase a lot, where it's just like he shoots it right away, like he knows his shots. Like I don't really get upset at it. He doesn't really hesitate, but sometimes it's just like, was that the best shot we could have gotten? Like, and he's making a lot of these, so it's like I said, hard to argue when a guy's making these shots. But I don't know. I wouldn't be mad at Andre taking the backup point guard role in a weird way too, if it came down to that.
Yeah. And especially when you get into the playoffs, like I would expect Dame to be playing pretty close to 40 minutes a game in real
Right.
playoff series. Like maybe not if you're facing a bad 7 or a bad 8 seed, but we've seen last year that that doesn't mean anything. Um,
Championship year, we had Jeff Teague for spot minutes in some
yeah,
of those games, more than we should have seen him. But I mean, we didn't have a
right,
backup point guard really, so I mean,
right.
it can work.
Yeah. And like you said, you can handle the ball handling portion of it with Giannis or Chris for a few minute stretch while Dame's out of the game and Andre's kind of guarding the ones in that position. And then on offense, he's not really the one. He's just kind of on offense. Um, yeah, I think that's a lot of good points. Jay is going to be super interesting because he was playing well before he got hurt. He was doing a lot of good things. So he's definitely going to come back and play. I'm sure there's going to be a build-up phase and it's going to take a while, but I would imagine by All-Star breakish, he's probably back to being a normal contributor. And at that point, there's going to be some decisions on whose minutes are getting cut. And like you said, I hope it's not Andre at that point.
Yeah,
I hope at that point he's pretty solidified in the rotation. So last thing kind of attached to this game that we kind of stepped towards and then we backed away. And I've been leading us down a weird path tonight, but um, Giannis, all-time leader in rebounds. You touched on it 10 years ago today. He made his first career start against the Knicks. We were looking at the graphic for that game. It was pretty funny. The Knicks were averaging 94 points a game. Bucks were averaging 89 points a game. I have no idea where those ranked in the league, but considering the Knicks had Melo and, well, actually that team was not very good around Melo, but still, it was probably a
yeah,
decent
middle of the
ranking in
pack at
terms.
least. And
Yeah.
then we just went out and scored 146 pretty easily.
Yep. So the game's obviously changed quite a bit in that decade, and we can take this any way we want to, but we've been praising Giannis constantly lately, and he deserves it. So the question is, what's your favorite memory or play or game of him? Just one. I mean, I think we would all choose the 50 in game six,
Yeah.
but how about maybe a little more niche?
Yeah. Um, Niche factor. This has been a big highlight for a while. I didn't poke fun at Giannis, but I talked about how he was like the skinny guy, looking when they posted those photos, and it's funny to see him back then. But that is where my memory comes from. Um, if you don't remember, it's always been a highlight that they show. But Giannis in the Garden when he had that block, and then takes it coast to coast, goes behind his back, and then just throws it down, and everyone's just like, it's almost like it was so loud that it was silent, and like our bench was like in shock, and it was like, oh my God, like what was that? Like he's that whole year he was giving us flashes. Obviously, that was his second year, I think. That was the 41-41 season. Um, and he was giving us just like at least like potential solid player flashes, like, and maybe even some people thought, I'm sure you thought all-star. And at that point, to me, that was just like when I'm like, this guy's something extra than what I even thought he was at that point. I think, I mean, I was a teenager, so I wasn't super smart, and I'm not even saying I'm super smart in basketball terms right now, but really back then, I didn't really even know what I was looking at sometimes when I was watching the games. But I remember tweeting like right after that play, like Giannis is the next MJ, and I think I've retweeted that tweet a couple of times when he had that 50-point ball, as you discussed in the playoffs or the championship game. But um, yeah, to me that was just when he arrived in my mind when that play happened, because I was just like, oh, this guy is something a little bit more than I maybe thought he was, and like even just him like mean mugging after that, like just the whole thing, it was like a preview of what we're gonna see for the next decade. It was
Yeah.
just so weird. And again in the Garden too. I mean, that can't be downplayed at all. Like that's like probably scary for most players, especially him being only like 20 years old at that point. Like to do that on that stage, it's just I don't know. And like I said, that was like a preview of what we're about to see. So that's what I always point to as my like first Giannis like starting his evolution.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. I actually thought about that one a little bit too. Well, first of all, Giannis and the Garden have a very good relationship. He has had a lot of fun moments in MSG. Like, first of all,
Yeah.
that's where he made his first appearance in an NBA game. Um, Scored his first point, had his first buzzer beater win there. He jumped over Tim Hardaway Jr. there. He had the play you're talking about. Um, he's just kind of always, I mean, even right away, you could see how Melo like was trying to intimidate him there, and Giannis wasn't gonna take it. So there's been a lot of times where over the course of the early part of his career, the Garden was a sign of what Giannis could be, like you were talking about, and that moment really encapsulated it because it was the entire like get a rebound or get a block, get a rebound behind the back at half court, and then finish strong with a dunk. And like you said, the mean mug, which looks hilarious. Um, when you watch the video of it, I mean, it looks so funny. He's so young and small there. Like it does not look anything like the guy who is so jacked that it doesn't even look real these days. But and you can see his teammates kind of laughing at it on the bench. Like they were jumped up for the play, but then when he mean mugged, they were like laughing at it because it was just like it just it looked funny. And I do remember Sidney Moncrief 100% butchering that call, and it always annoys me whenever I watch the the highlight of it, but we'll move on from that now. I'll give you mine. Funny enough, also against the Knicks. Not really not really a play, not even as much about the game, but it was his rookie year, and it was the first game that his parents were there for. And he had a good game that day. It was probably one of his best games of his rookie year, and you could just kind of see the energy he played with when he finally had them there. I think he had 15 points. I don't have it up in front of me now. I know he had 15 points. I don't remember the rest of the stat line. I know Brandon Knight hit a game-winning kind of a dagger three. Um, and I just remember like the way he talked about in like at that point, pretty broken English, but the way he talked about how happy he was to have his parents there and how much energy it brought him and like just he was such an easy guy to root for already before any of that. But hearing him talk about his family and seeing how his family just was so happy to be watching him and happy to be there and so friendly. And it came out not that long, a few days later, probably the video, the first time I ever saw it of him pointing up to the rafters, telling his parents, like, maybe my name will be up there next to Kareem someday. And like, I can, anytime I see that video, it's like, oh, okay, I'm getting a little, I, that tugs at me a little bit, like, especially after his dad passed and everything. But
Hmm.
just a lot of the moments with him, everyone jokes about Thanasis, but Giannis's family is so important to him. So that type of moment and seeing how much it's mattered to him his whole time. And I genuinely believe that the way the Bucks treated his family and were so welcoming to his family is a legitimate reason why Giannis hasn't left the Bucks,
Hmm.
um, and why he hasn't even really entertained it too much. So that moment to me is just like it wasn't that much about his play. It wasn't about anything else. It's just kind of the person that he was and the way he valued that type of loyalty and family. I think it showed a lot about what he was as a person and what he was going to be as a person. And then the player kind of came with that type of drive and that type of just total love for what he did.
Hmm.
Um, okay, I do want to mention one other one just because I'm not going to dive into it as much, but just because I talked about his dad passing, and I do think that the game against Portland, against Dame, when he scored 44, his first time scoring 40, knocked the ball away from
Oh
McCollum and
yeah.
then finished, and then he blocked Nurkic at the rim to seal the game, basically. Like that
Hmm.
game to me was like okay, he's not just an all-star. Like this dude could be the best player in the world. He could be an MVP. So that game to me kind of just
Yeah.
sealed like, oh wow, okay, this dude, there's a different level than even I was thinking, and I was crazy high on him at some
Yeah.
points during his early career. So,
I
um,
mean, you brought, not to cut you up, but you brought up a good point too. We talk about it with like some of these Brewer episodes with like the mental aspect and him like even before he even played a game or whenever that was when he pointed up to the rafters, like I might be up there one day. Like you look at him and you're like, that was probably like remember that clip when he on like the interview and he's like, I'm gonna be the MVP and
yeah,
everyone kind of laughs at him. Like it wasn't funny to him because he actually believed it and like he maybe that scrawny kid or whatever, like but he always had that within him, and that just goes a long way of this kind of that mental toughness that he's always had. And even when that same year I talked about that Knicks game with the coast to coast one, we talked about the Dunleavy play when he fired back at Dunleavy. I mean, like all these like little like tidbits of like this guy where it's just like it seems like a guy you could easily bully and push around, but he didn't think so. Like he didn't he just always thought he was that good and he always thought he could be that good. So I mean, it goes a long way. And I guess evaluating some of these younger players too, when we look at them, and I'm not saying Andre or Marjan's going to be that, but we talked about a guy like Marjan too, and now I'm getting off on a tangent, but a guy who maybe doesn't have like that confidence all the time. I mean, that's kind of like scary a little bit when it's like that stuff does matter if you don't actually have that confidence. And I mean, again, I'm not thinking Marjan was ever going to be, maybe at one point I thought maybe he's got some all-star potential, and maybe he still does, but definitely not like a Giannis potential, but I mean that stuff does matter, and we've seen these breadcrumbs for over the years, and like you said, we can come up with 20, 30, 50 memories of Giannis where
oh yeah,
this we could make a whole story documentary about him, and hopefully we get that one day. But yeah, I mean that part's always interesting to me is when you see the breadcrumbs of kind of how he became Giannis as we know him now.
yeah. No, that's why I had to throw that one out there because yours basically was like the first, okay, this could be an all-star, and that one to me was like this could be an MVP.
Yeah.
And the guy who could legitimately lead the Bucks to a championship, and he did, and I enjoyed that. Um, all right, moving on before we start talking. I could talk Giannis all day, every day. We do have Spurs game coming up tomorrow, same day or today if you're listening to it on Tuesday. We just learned right before we started recording that Wemby is going to be out, which is a bummer because I was very much looking forward to that matchup.
Hmm.
The Spurs have really struggled after what was a kind of like a fun, exciting start where it's like, oh, okay, maybe they could be like a play-in team this year. And then they lost 18 in a row, I believe, and that was a pretty quick way to rule that out. Um, I don't know, you got anything specific that you'll be watching for in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I listen to obviously like some of the national podcasts like Zach Lowe and stuff, and I've been kind of following a little bit of the Spurs because they're going to follow Wemby obviously everywhere he goes this year. But if you notice looking at their stats too, I mean, they start all big guys, really not big guys, but they don't really have a true point guard that they start. So it's I'm not going to say they're tanking, but they're definitely just trying to be like, let's just put all of our fun pieces together and see what happens. Because I mean, like Trey Jones should be starting with that or Victor
Yes.
Wembanyama, and like that's like again, we talk about like again, that's like a goodwill version of like Giannis Dame, and that's respects to Wembanyama. I'm not saying he's bad. It's just as comparatively right now in their careers, but kind of that same thing. They go together like bread and butter. I mean, that would be a perfect matchup for them, but they insist on having Jeremy Shohan as the point guard. And again, he's a fun player too, but they just got a lot of fun little pieces. I like Devin Vassell. Keldon Johnson's is kind of like a guy who can go on a heater and seems like a guy who would kill the Bucks. And Zach Collins probably, I assume he's starting. Is he starting next
Yep.
to Victor? Yeah, he is too. So because they don't want Victor playing the five really, but um, again, these are I feel like every team in the league I can get scared of if they're not very good because they got talent. But I think a team that we should definitely be taking care of, and especially without Victor. I mean, I guess maybe without Victor, maybe that lineup actually makes a little bit more sense now that they have to start Trey, and
It
all
is
of a sudden it looks
possible.
like it's capable of beating somebody. But yeah, it almost seems like it's like a purposeful thing. Like they're trying to actually just not lose necessarily, but again, like I said, they're just putting their fun pieces out there and saying, let's see who works and who doesn't. But um,
Yeah, I don't know why Pop is convinced that Sohan can be a point guard. He cannot be a point guard. I've watched a lot of the Spurs games this year
yeah,
because I mean, Wemby is incredible. It's hard. You can't really comp him to anybody except from what I've seen of like Ralph Sampson, maybe. Like that's probably the closest comp you can come up with for him, but
yeah,
he's special on defense. He reads the game really well. I mean, he sees the floor well. Like we kind of talked about with Ajax, he's not that level of kind of processing the game, but he's way up there for a rookie, and especially a rookie who's as freaky athletic and talented and all those other things. But yeah, beyond him, like you said, Vassell or Keldon Johnson, like those two can have really big games from time to time where they go for 30. And if you run into them on a really hot night tomorrow, like you never know. But without Wemby, you should be able to take care of business here. And I would hope
yeah.
that you can kind of have a similar situation to the Pistons game where we don't have to worry about the starters playing too many minutes and they can kind of get a little bit more
Mhm.
rest in the fourth. Um, yeah, that's really all I got on that game. It's
It's funny. You just we're both like, oh, I don't know why Sean's playing point guard, and then here I am screaming about Ajax being our backup point guard. But no, like, that's a little different situation. This guy's starting and playing minutes, but
yeah,
I mean, our old friend Mamu is on this team too as well. So if he makes an
he'll
appearance, be sure to give him a
he'll
nice ovation.
he'll probably play tomorrow with no Wemby. He'll
Yeah,
probably get I he might start tomorrow. That wouldn't shock me. That would
I
not
liked
shock me.
Mamu,
I
so
like Mamu too. I think the Bucks let Mamu go for as a favor more than
respect. Yeah,
yeah. I don't think it was that they didn't believe that Mamu could actually help somebody. They just didn't think it would ever work out for the Bucks. So they
it
gave
was
him a
just a
chance to go
Thon
with the
Maker
Bucks.
treatment in 2019. They just said, you know what, we respect you so much that we want to put you on a, we want to give you a chance.
That's totally what they did with Thon, yes. Um, Um, no, but yeah, I just don't. If we lose that game, I'm not going to be thrilled. I'll tell you that right now. With
Yeah,
Wemby, I could see anything happening at any point. Like you never know what might happen against a team
right.
like that, but you would hope without him that this should not be an issue. Um, yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we get into our random bucks?
Nope.
All right. I will I'll go first on this one. So my pick was Kendall Marshall, who honestly, I can't believe he only lasted for like half seasons basically in the NBA. Now he kept getting hurt, and that was a big part of it. But he was one of those guys like I've always loved just a like a pass first type point guard, especially growing up, because that was how I played basketball. Was like I shot wide open shots, but I mostly just moved the ball and tried to make cool behind the back passes at any point that I could. Um, and that was basically Kendall Marshall. So I just remember it was the kid era, and the main thing I remember from his time is that they just started posting him up a ton and it was going super well. Like he was playing really well out of the post and he could make some fun reads passing wise, but he also just finished well. I know he shot really well from three and small, like it was a low number of attempts, but I was excited about Kendall Marshall. I really thought he was going to be like a long-term backup point guard for the Bucks. And after his injury, he only played, I think, like 20 more games in the league, and then I haven't even looked into it. I don't know. He might be playing somewhere, but I'm pretty sure he just retired, and he might be helping North Carolina with something at this point. I don't even know, but he was a guy I loved in that draft. I loved him when he was with the Suns his rookie year, and I was so pumped when he came to the Bucks and just never really lived up to the hype. I still wonder what would have happened if he didn't mess up his knees so many times so early, but it's funny that I give Kendall Marshall the benefit of the doubt, but not Jabari Parker in that regard. But Gunnar, let's move on to your guy. Who do you have this time around?
Yeah, that was a good pick. I loved for every reason you just said. I loved Kendall Marshall as well. Um, close to that era, but I think right before it. Um, I think this is actually one of the best picks we've had. Not to be unbiased, but or to be biased, I guess I am being, but um, I picked Tobias Harris. Now, just a perfect obscure buck, but also for how he became such a good player afterwards, and just a solid player. He's still going, being a solid player. Um, I always wonder. I honestly, he showed flashes even his first rookie year that I actually liked watching him play. And then I remember the next year, his second season, he started like opening night versus the Celtics, I remember. And
Yep.
maybe even like those, I was trying to pull up his game log. I feel like it was like the first two games or something. He had like 18 or something points. And I'm like, this is it. This is the perfect guy that we need. We do not see this guy the rest of
Nope.
the season. Like, what did he have to prove? He just played good for like at least a couple of games. You
Skiles just
started him.
Skiles just benched him after he played well his first two games. It made no sense.
You literally started him. You showed him that you liked him, and then he barely plays. And then, of course, he ended up getting traded for a guy that we both like, JJ Redick, of course. And
Yeah.
JJ didn't play. He probably had his worst stretch ever in his career with us.
Yep.
And I like JJ, but I mean, and then seeing kind of what happened, obviously, we went into a 15-win season after those first couple of years with Tobias. It's just like that would have been a nice guy to pair with Giannis. I don't know if that would that have affected anything. I don't think so. No, I think we still could have technically gotten him. Probably. Well, I guess if Tobias ended up being super good and then like
Right.
we
If it
get
would
more
have
than
affected the record enough to
yeah,
have the Hawks move in front of us who were going to take
right.
Giannis, then maybe.
It
But
could have worked maybe, yeah. But then I
yeah,
guess we could have avoided Jabari Parker and then we could have they
that
play
is
the same spot and
that is
so it
how
all
I
leads
make
to Tobias Harris.
that is how I make myself feel better about every single Bucks move that didn't go well. Is I say to myself, well, maybe we wouldn't have got Giannis if that would have been played
Yeah,
out better. Now, post Giannis moves, I can't post Giannis draft, I can't use that logic anymore. But
right.
when I talk about any trade that happened pre, like maybe if the Bucks got Steph in that Bogut trade, they wouldn't have been able to get Giannis. Who knows? I could live with
True.
my Monte
Yeah.
Ellis years if I can think about it that way. So I was just looking. I found the Tobias game logs. He did score 18 in that opener.
Okay.
He played 32 minutes. He played 13 minutes the next game, and then he never got over 24 again as a Buck. And he had did not play coach's decisions. It looks like about 10, 11, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, like 27 before we traded him.
Awesome.
And yeah, I mean, he didn't play over 10 minutes after game 11 of the season. So I
I
don't
mean,
know.
it was just weird. Like even stuff came out how like Scott didn't even like love Brandon Jennings. Like I just think he was just such a weird coach sometimes. Like and then he did like him because then he brought him to the Magic. I remember in a trade. So
I
it's like
know.
I don't understand Scott Skiles. He's a guy. He was like the poster child of like mediocrity basketball. If you want
Oh
to
yeah.
talk about it, and we could talk forever about that era of the Bucks. But whether him on the Bulls or whatever, it just seemed like a guy who just loved being like 42 wins.
Yep. Yeah, no. I think he just didn't like that they didn't play enough defense. And it's like, well, yeah, but you have to
That
have
could be it.
somebody
Yeah.
who can score on the court there, Scotty.
Yeah.
It can't all be Luke Richard and Bahamute playing. You got to have somebody who can put the ball in the bucket. No, but that's a good pick, and I feel like some people are probably thinking that's not that obscure, and it's like, well, he really didn't play that much for the Bucks. Like,
Yeah, that's what I mean. He was Bucks obscure, but he also like for what he became, it's like it seems like it's obvious, but
yeah, yeah. And I remember draft night, the first, the Bucks pick was Jimmer, and
oh yeah,
let
yeah,
let me tell you, as a white kid who, like I said, I was a pass first guy, but I enjoyed me some shooting some threes, and seeing Jimmer do what he was doing at that time, I was like,
that was our Kobe. We were yelling Jimmer
oh,
shooting half
we were
quarters.
yelling Jimmer. Yeah, if I shot a piece of paper, it was not Kobe at the time, it was Jimmer. No, but so on draft night, I was all pumped that we got Jimmer, and then I probably went to bed and didn't even know we had Tobias Harris instead until the next morning. But
Yeah,
um, no, he was fun to watch, and he still, like you said, he's had a very, very solid career. I will just one more note on him, I guess. Do you remember? I think it was the next year when we were playing them when he hit the 4-point play to tie the game with like a second left.
oh yeah, Was that the when is it the Magic? Yeah, he
Yeah.
roasted us against us. I
Oh
remember
yeah.
that.
Yep. But
What did
he
he end with that game? Do you have that game up?
no, I
Oh,
completely
it
blanked.
had to be 30 plus, but yeah, that was just the ultimate slap in the face. And then, like I said, JJ not playing well for us either, which was just
Right.
honestly not a good mix in that roster, even to begin
No.
with. Like
No.
you said, Scott was about defense. Why did you bring in JJ to shoot? And we don't have a great offense, so it's like not a guy who's going to function in that offense anyways. And it just sucks because I love JJ, but
Yeah.
just
No.
all around bad.
He yeah, he that 4 point play, I just remember watching the game and we were up four and fouled him on a three that he hit with like two
Ah, yeah.
seconds left in the game. I don't remember who did it. I'm sure I was not happy with them at the time,
By
but
Jason Kidd math, I mean, if he missed the shot, you're still going to win because it's only 3 free throws. You're still going to be up by one.
yeah.
Jason Kidd says that we're going to get the ball back. It's just, it would make sense at that point,
Well,
but
Kid would have told Tobias to miss the free throw. He
yeah,
would have said the best odds of us winning are getting a tip in on this missed free throw. So miss it and
sure.
we'll try and win before we go to OT.
Yeah.
But no, that sorry, now we're going on a tangent about Tobias, but I just remember that game so vividly and how mad I was that he was the one who hit the game tying 4 point play. Um yeah, I any other thoughts before we wrap it up here?
Nope.
All right. For those of you listening, please like and subscribe on whatever platform you are listening on. Remember to follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod. Like I mentioned last time, we are trying to be more active on there. And then again, please feel free to leave feedback for us on how we can get better. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time.